I arrived in Australia January 2020. So when I went over there, I didn't know what COVID was. People were just starting to talk about it, and then it kind of just snowballed into this massive thing over the course of the next few months. And so we were in lockdown. I was in Sydney. I think that lockdown was only 6 weeks. And so not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the borders opened up. I did some traveling and then flew across the country. And then when I was in Western Australia, because they were very strict on their border rules, I was barely in lockdown at all there. I was living in a smaller town at the time, and it was COVID didn't exist, which was really nice. Especially because family and friends back here were definitely feeling the effects, and also when you see it on the news and everything, a lot of countries were really struggling, where the cases were just really low in Australia in general at that time. And then when I moved a few hours south to Perth, which is the main city in Western Australia, there were a few lockdowns, but it was when there was one case. There was one case of COVID, and so they locked everyone down for 3 days to avoid the spread. So I feel that's the kind of stuff that you guys would hear about. I'm oh my gosh, that's crazy. But in reality, it really saved us from getting sick. I never got COVID when I was there, so that's kind of nice.
That's interesting.
But then, as it later on, it was more 2022 when it kind of got bad there. And that's when it started to get really big.
Interesting. So it was really delayed.
So the lockdowns changed in 2022 then?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was they didn't have as many lockdowns, but it was more just everyone was very restricted in ways. You couldn't travel as much. You were still able to live your life normally and go out to the shops and things like that, but the borders were closed.
You have to wear masks and stuff too then, I'm guessing.
Yes. Sometimes, when it first started happening, when I was in Sydney and people were just wearing masks because that's what they preferred. I only wore it when you could possibly be arrested if you weren't wearing one.
Yeah.
So I think that's the part that you kind of hear it was really intense in that sense. But I don't know. I feel I barely spent any time in lockdown. So from my experience, I'm it was fine. I was still able to travel around, things like that. But Australia in general, it was, pretty intense in that sense.
It's interesting.
Because Melbourne, they were one of the most lockdown city in the world.
Jeez. So. But later on during the course of the COVID era or whatever you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, later on once they started.
Makes sense. Yeah, I guess it's kind of funny because they really are the opposite of the world from us, in every single way. Because I remember in Ohio, we got it, I want to say the USA got it pretty early on. But we also got out of it pretty early on, I think. Compared to
lockdown was March 15th.
Yeah.
Because I had surgery the 10th.
Okay.
And so I was out, just incapacitated. I had shoulder surgery. And then COVID happened. And people would tell me about it. I'm there's no way. Everyone's wearing masks. No one can go outside. I'm that doesn't exist. So because I was out. And I think maybe 2 weeks later, I drove to the store with my dad, and there's nobody out. And I'm what happened? It felt like the end of the world. It just didn't make no sense that I'm still on drugs at that point. So it's it was just so trippy. But COVID is it was so weird. It's weird to think about. I feel it didn't happen, but that it did happen at the same time.
Yeah.
When you were there, when COVID kind of started over here, did that because I don't know what your travel plans were when you originally went to Australia.
Yeah.
Did COVID kind of prolong your stay? You were there and you're all of a sudden it was COVID's I really can't go home now. I guess I might as well just stay in Australia.
Yeah, definitely. So when I first went over there, I was just kind of I think I'll live in Sydney for 6 months, have that experience. I didn't really know much about Australia, to be honest. I didn't realize how big it was and how much there was to see there. I feel I don't know, that's just not really something that we learn much in the States about Australia. So, yeah, that was kind of my plan. I was Great Barrier Reef, got to see that when I'm there. And little things like that. But I don't know. I thought I was going to be there for 6 months, maybe 8. I could be back at least by Christmas for sure. So that would have been a year. But when COVID hit, I had a lot of friends that went home because, they just felt it was, the right idea, the right choice to make. And, they didn't want to be separated from their families for who knows how long. But I had talked to my family, not that I ever really considered going home, but they were do you want to come home? And I was no. I'm just going to stick it out because it'll pass. And the more that I had made friends and talked to other travelers, like I was realizing there was a lot to see in that country. So I just decided to stay, and I knew that my visa was going to last for a year. So I was like, okay, I'll just do the year, go from there. When my visa was it was about to run out, I still didn't want to leave because at that point I had road tripped most of the East Coast, and now I was living out west, and I wanted to do all the West Coast, basically. I want to do everything, but I was like, there's still so much more to see. I want to stay here. And so I started looking into visa options, and they actually created a COVID visa